Welcome to your free 3-part art workshop. In this video, I call it Tell Your Story. Make sure you download the PDF workbook to help you understand the first principle I demonstrate. Also join the Facebook group to share with us how you're going and if you have any questions. I want to show you how your art can evolve. You can take change, principles, methods and procedures to enhance your story. These are called principles and not rules because you will use your own sensibilities to evolve and to grow as an artist. Let's give you principles to make your art better, no matter what medium you're using. They apply to everything. Let's turn your mistakes into corrections. You can immediately apply these suggestions. They will assist you with your creations and your own sensibilities. Everybody's different. You are your own creator. Let's have fun together. I'm Kathy Alva, the founder of the Creative Impulse program. I want to take you on a journey where you tell your story and ignite your creative impulses. What I want to show you is how to break free from the old, outdated ways of looking at and making art. Nobody wants stress that's sky high when you've bought expensive materials and rock bottom when you don't arrive at that picture that you had in your head, the image that you want to create, the story that you want to tell. It gives you the means to make art that you and everyone around you will enjoy. You tell your story. So if you're an established artist, or you need new ideas, or if you're someone who's starting from scratch, you don't want to waste a lot of money trying out all kinds of things that you're not sure will give you the results you want. You can change your situation by either making a slight shift or a giant leap. Let's take that together. To start, let's talk about the one principle that can make or break your art, called design or composition. Design comes from the word the Italian word, and it refers to the arrangement of the components, the shapes, even colors, in your final work, arriving at the most pleasing end so that if you just take one component out or move it, it is not as good as your final. So even hanging it upside down, if it's an abstract, it is a complete work with that composition or design. The easiest and most important is the rule of thirds or the golden rule. This is not new, but it is still the most effective and most important principle reason how you will arrange things on your canvas, even a video that you're making, your sculpture, your drawing. It applies to all art forms.
Okay.
Where you place your shape, your color, your tone, or your emphasis will give a clue to the viewer the subject, emotion, or intention of your artwork. So the rule of thirds, you're dividing your piece into 3 up and 3 across. From left to right. We are taught to read from left to right, from the top to the bottom of a page. And so that is how your viewer is going to view your artwork, whether this be a flat artwork or a sculpture. The placement of your shapes tell the story. If you are placing your focal point, your emphasis, your largest shape, top left, that shape, that subject is leading you into the artwork. Top right that subject has already come into your plane, your picture plane. Bottom left, that little figure is in the picture and sometimes moving up and inwards. So it also depends on the lines, the direction lines. Bottom left, bottom right, your figure, your shape is going out and flowing out of the picture. And so these are telling the story, the placement of your shapes, or the emphasis, what you're using to emphasize or tell your story, where you're placing it in the picture plane is part of your story. And this is the most important aspect when you are planning your artwork. So to recap, depending on what your subject, your topic is, where you're going to place your focal point, what your focal point is, just think of the emotions that arise from where you place your focal point. If you are going to have a lonely little figure, your focal point is often your darkest or your most saturated color. So your little focal point is down there. You will have directional lines taking this little figure into your picture, into your painting, if you are talking about the journey. So from the bottom to the top, if you are talking about something falling out, you are going to place it down at the bottom. These can be very, very subtle shifts. I saw a beautiful picture of an Arctic fox, and it was this white ice and just the very fine outlines of the eye and the very, very slight differences in the white that made this picture so impressive. So you can have a very, very bland, very monotone canvas with just a few little impactful areas to make a very dramatic picture. So if you are talking about an epiphany, so if you're talking about Jesus coming, something like that, you will have your direction coming from the top left, coming into the picture, and you will have your other components down here. You will create interest also by the difference in size of your shapes. Because we have very similar shapes, that is also quite boring, so you will vary your shapes to create interest. So think of these. If your subject is coming in to the picture, you are talking about entering into a forest, you will have your focal point there. From your focal point, from your point of interest, you want to also direct your viewer's eye around the picture and possibly back or out of the picture. So remember that your viewer will come from the top left, and let's change that shape. You will have lines that will then take the viewer around the picture and out, if that is your intention, or back. So whether this is an abstract or whether it is a representation, think of the placement of your subject, of your objects, of your shapes. Think of the size of your shapes in relation to one another. If this is your focal point, you will want it either to be more saturated in color larger, a more interesting shape. If you had just bland, monotone, or all circles, and this being a square or a pointy shape, you could have it with spikes coming out. Then that will be your focal point. If you want to talk about symmetry, then you're going to be doing something different. And here, remember that if you have a circle in the center, that is where the eye is going to stay. So your viewer will look and then get locked into the circle here. So you can, if that is what you're talking about. So if you're talking about symmetry, you're talking about balance, then you can have the same image in all of your planes. You could even have this a square and divide it into 4. Remembering again that if you have a circle in the middle, that is where your viewer is going to look at, and you need to take the eye around the rest of your square. Otherwise, that is quite a boring composition. Nobody will be that impressed with that on its own. So you will have to take components and again, don't make them all the same. If you do, just have 1 or 2 highlights. Let's use the and that will take the eye around. So if your contrast is shape, color, saturation, just remember where you are going to place each thing. And now I'm going to finish an abstract painting. I started with a very small painting. I did an underpainting, and I'm going to do the finishing top layer in the oil now. And I just wanted to talk about red. So depending on what you are trying to say in your painting, that is going to determine the placement, as I said. And think about your story. What are you trying to say? Right, I have prepared this canvas with underpainting of acrylic paint. I want this picture to celebrate red. This area I have painted in a green from cerulean blue and chrome yellow, and the underpainting I paint in the complement of the color that I'm going to paint in oil. The bottom third I'm going to paint green, and so I've painted it in the complement of red. So celebration of red is going to be the dominant theme, and I want my focal point to be in this bottom third here. So the focal point, think of your 3 lines horizontal and your 3 lines, your 2 lines dividing it into 3 vertical. People actually prefer horizontal paintings because of the way we see. Our eyes actually see circles, and your right and your left eye overlap, and so the vision that we have from our eyes is wider sideways than vertical. And so that's why predominantly people prefer horizontal instead of vertical pictures. But here I'm celebrating red. So I am starting with my green. So there are a number of ways that you can tell your story. You can point to your focal point with your color, with directional lines, with contrast, with saturation. And so if you leave some of the underpainting, you enhance that green that you are now talking about. Because I painted very thickly with in the underpainting, I have these structural lines already that are going vertical. And so your interest is enhanced. If you wanted a very subtle statement, then you wouldn't have that variation there. You take your colour all the way to the edge. Once I've done the red, then I'll have a look and see if I need to change the green in any way. A bit more down here. The colours that I use, I demonstrate in my colour mixing video. I only use 3 primaries, 6, and white and black. So I use alizarin crimson, cadmium red, cadmium yellow, lemon yellow, cerulean blue, and ultramarine blue. So as I said, the saturation of your colour also creates a focal point. So where you have your lower tones, so I'm drawing the eye to the focal point here. If I do a big canvas, then I do it on the floor and take more time. So the green underpainting behind this red gives it a depth of colour and the contrast that you want. Right now the green is popping forward. I'm going to add more of the yellow to create a more orange. Your brush strokes will also create more interest, and so think of the brush strokes pointing towards or away from, using your brush strokes towards your focal point, away from your focal point, or even in a circle, depending on your story. So if you're talking about a storm, you will have circles, you will have swirlings. Just like a novel. You can also draw attention using foreground, middle ground and background. You can enhance your background, middle ground or foreground, again depending on your story. I'm now going to So I've used a very thin black line. I have blurred it, and the white against the black causes this tension and so creates that focal point as well. In doing so, the green that was popping out, this has now created the focal point there, and it has overtaken it in focal point from the green background. I think I do still need to mute the green a bit on this side here, so as you are drawn to this point as well. Just adding some interest there. If you paint around the side of the canvas, then you can just hang it like that. You don't have to frame it, which I quite like. Going to add a bit more black. There we go. It's a bit too much there, so I'm going to mute it, blend it in, and create more towards the focal point. So I want the eye drawn here. Although these, so as I said, you want your focal point, you want somebody to then understand your story, but then areas of interest will take the eye around. A boring picture is one that has a focal point and nothing else going on the picture plane. It doesn't have to be as brightly colourful as this. As I said, you can be quite subtle. Often the most powerful are the most subtle pictures that you paint. So I'm just toning it down here. Again, you're creating more interest with a variation. So the line, the shape, the colors you use, the different hues, the texture you use, the tone, positive and negative. These are all principles of art, design, the organization, the composition. You are arranging your composition around visual elements with the principles of art. Wavy lines create a totally different feeling. In fact, wavy lines are more talking about nature. How you paint, how you draw, the colors you use are yours, and they are your story. Everybody is unique. You can copy the masters to get techniques and to refine what you're trying to say. But think of the Mavericks, Van Gogh. He changed things completely. He was self-taught. He didn't go to the academies, and look at how he turned art on its head. Poor man died frustrated and unappreciated by shooting himself. How awful is that? So there we have our celebration of red. Do you see how the introduction of blue, of a more blue-green, creates more depth? And so we'll be talking a bit more about the use of line in the second video. So we'll talk about these visual elements again, but we will talk more in the next video. And I hope you've enjoyed this one and that you join us for the next one. Please join the Facebook group and send comments or questions if there are any. I'll be more than happy to see what you have to say.